This video is going to be just a little bit of a helper video on how to approach this most recent challenge because let's go to the instructions here first. So I've loaded those up, and by the way, you should see something similar to this. You should see instructions and then the challenge itself. There is a link in the challenge to this, but if you go into these instructions, it would look something like this, and you should see a web view. Close this off. This is just plain HTML. We don't need that. We don't need this. I don't think this is the greatest display, but regardless. So you can, there we go. That's a little better. So this is this gives you the configuration here. So you've got main, you get the main file, and you're not to change this file. I don't want to see any print statements in it. I don't want to see any code in here other than what I already have. And what do I have? I import from lib. Lib is another Python module. We import these are two functions that you will write. Now the problem you're going to have is immediately when you go into lib, which is where you're going to write these, nothing exists. So if you run it, it'll run main, and of course it will return an error saying you cannot import name filter vowels from lib. Moreover, in keeping with that, if you run the auto grader, the test won't even run. It'll just throw you an error. So you have to you start here. Now, okay, and we've talked about this before, but when you have to write, well, let's go back to the challenge. So you have to write two procedures. And let's start with this one first. Let's take it apart piece by piece. So you have to write, that's the name, that's the variable name of the function. And the parameter, it just takes in a string, and it returns a list of vowels. And only vowels that are found in any string parameter. So it could be any string. You can't write it for any particular string. It has to be abstracted up a little bit. And in addition, any uppercase vowel has to be converted back to lowercase. And then you count, you store all of those in a list. So you go here and you say, well, oh, should I start with def and then the name of the function? And like I've said before, don't do that. I don't do that, quite honestly. In fact, what I typically do, if I go to the shell, I can create a file here, or in the shell, I can just say touch, and you can call it anything you want. But I'll say sandbox, okay, .py. Now, you'll see somewhere in here, sandbox has been created. I can open it up here. Now, let's get rid of that. And it's a Python module. Now, if I run Python space sandbox, nothing will happen. Well, it runs, but there is nothing in there. Okay, so if you go back to the instructions, let's go down here. All right, you're going to take in a string, and you're going to return a list of vowels. So just think about that. Let's just start with any string. This is any string. You might put in. It doesn't make any difference what that string is. Okay, it should be designed to handle an empty string. It could be, you know, a book length string. It doesn't make any difference. So, having a little technical difficulty here. Ignore the man behind the screen. I hate technology. Okay, so now you're going to count vowels. And how are you going to do that? And you're going to have to put them in a list. Well, whenever you write that function, the first thing you do is really you should, so let's say you're inside the function. Let's just pretend we're inside the function, but we're not. And we're going to say, you know, this is our little line here inside the function. And the first thing you should do, really, once you get inside, is create an empty list. Why? Because that's where you're going to add the vowels after you've converted them to lowercase. You're going to end up, so for example, Now you're not going to write this in. It's just going to be an empty list. But for example, you have an I. It would look something like this when you're all done. You have an I, a capital A, but that'll be converted down to a lowercase a. And then string has another I, seems like. And then you have an O, and then you have a U, etc. But that's going to be the return value. So you have to create an empty list to store those. Now, the second thing you have to do is you have to iterate through the string. Now, we've gone over this a bajillion times. How do you iterate through a string? Well, you know, there's loops, right? There are built-in methods, but the loop is going to be your go-to tool for that. So you're going to write a loop. Now, you can use, there's two types of loops. We haven't covered the for loop, but there's a while loop, and you know how to use while loops. You should by now. So you use a while loop, and it's going to be keyed to, the Boolean will be keyed to the length of that string, whatever it is that acts as the parameter for the function. And as you go through the list, you iterate through, right, each character. And if that character is a vowel, is it, well, how do you determine if it's a vowel? Well, we've done this before, and you really, I should have mentioned this earlier, create an empty list, and then you're going to have a vowel set, right? And you're going to say, is it in that vowel set? And if it's in there, is in that vowel set, then it's going to be added into the list you created, okay? Then when you're all done, now it has to be converted to lowercase, and you're going to have to check to make sure, and what I would do is convert it to lowercase and then check it in the vowel set to create a lowercase vowel set. And then you add it into the list, and then outside of the while loop, you return the list. And that's it. It's really, you know, there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps or so in there, maybe 8. I don't know. It depends on how you do it. But that would satisfy that that particular function, that first function. And it has to be a return value, and it has to be a list, because the next function is going to take that list in as an argument. All right, we're going to pause here.